Hey everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. There's a lot of activity going on with broadband deployment and federal funds that companies are taking advantage of. So this is despite the fact that we have to wait for a long time for the BEAD funds to become available. And some of those are major MSOs. We'll talk about that in just a second. Thanks for joining me. Rick Uzzi here with Broadband Deployment News. So I saw these two stories recently in Telecompetitor, just a couple days ago actually, and it just kind of goes to show you that there's a lot happening right now. So a lot of people are putting in, all the states have put in their, basically their letters of intent that they want to take advantage of the BEAD money that's going to be available. We're waiting on the broadband maps to figure out how much each state is going to get. But there are other programs that have been out there for a while that have been releasing money. That money's been released. There's RDOF money that's being released. A good portion of that's been released directly to service providers from the federal government. And then there's money through ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act, that was part of the coronavirus package. That money has been, a lot of money has been given to the states, and the states are now releasing that to the service providers. So we're seeing some of that. So I hear you see Comcast is a big winner in the latest West Virginia broadband grant funding. So you see here that this is a large MSO that's taking advantage of some of these funds to be able to expand their service area and to be able to cover some areas that were not covered. So West Virginia Governor Jim Justice announced preliminary approval for close to $21 million in funding for 6 broadband infrastructure projects in the state. Comcast was the largest winner of this West Virginia broadband funding. The $21 million in grants are part of an ongoing broadband infrastructure funding program in the state labeled the Major Broadband Project Strategies, or MBPS program, which itself is a part of the governor's billion-dollar broadband strategy. This $21 million will help fund 628 miles of new fiber infrastructure, providing broadband connectivity to 5,800 homes, approximately 5,849 homes and businesses throughout the state. Other sources of funding, including match funding, will kick in an additional $13 million for a total of $34 million in funding. Mentions here a quote from the governor. He says, "We're going to keep announcing round after round of these projects until we light up every nook and cranny of our state with broadband. West Virginians everywhere should be incredibly excited." So this is all taking place prior to the money that West Virginia is going to get through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and specifically the BEAD portion of that, Broadband Equity Access and Deployment. So they're going to be putting in to get their share of that money. They're going to get a minimum of $100 million, we know that, and then they're going to get some amount on top of that based on the number of unserved locations that they have. Now, they're a small state, but they also probably have a lot of unserved locations, which they're trying to address through this, and they'll be addressing through future money. Comcast wins big. Cable MSO Comcast is by far the largest grant winner in this round, gaining $14.7 million of the $20.8 million to build 304 miles of fiber that will eventually reach 1,402 addresses in West Virginia. Comcast kicked in over $6 million in matching funds. Other grant winners include Shentel, $1.1 million, Frontier, $1.6 million, DQE Communications, $1 million, and CityNet, $2.2 million. Large cable companies like Comcast have become much more active in targeting rural broadband expansion funding provided by state and federal governments. Charter is by far the most active, having won over $1 billion in RDOF funding, and we'll read about Charter here in just a moment. And they have been very big in the RDOF side as well. Funding for state programs like this one in West Virginia come from a variety of sources, with much of it flowing from federal government programs like ARPA and the CARES Act and the U.S. Treasury Capital Funds program. Based on activity to date, we can probably expect large cable companies like Comcast and Charter to continue to be active participants in these rural broadband expansion funding programs. And absolutely, I mean, the money's out there. There's no reason that they would be excluded from that. Now, a lot of people don't like that because these are the big behemoth MSOs, and they feel like they're not, people are not going to get good customer service because they're not local, those kinds of things. But, these companies, obviously, they have the capability and the technology and the money to be able to be matching funds like this. So they are going to be big in these funding things. We'll have to see if anything in the BEAD program, because of the scoring in the BEAD program and how the states have to do that, whether that will give more of an advantage to local companies and public-private partnerships, those kinds of things. So here you see this other story. Charter grabs half of its latest North Carolina rural broadband grants. North Carolina Broadband Infrastructure Office yesterday awarded $23.4 million in growing rural economics with access to technology. Great grants. I like that acronym better. That's easier than the other one was. To expand broadband infrastructure in 12 counties, which will boost service for nearly 7,000 households and 374 businesses. Some programs are funded at least in part through programs created in the ARPA and the CARES Act, so very similar. More federal broadband money will flow to the states once the BEAD program gets underway. Half of the 12 awards went to Charter. The cable company has taken an aggressive approach to obtaining government funding for rural broadband expansion, in addition to its $1.2 billion take from the RDOF program. Charter is pursuing additional programs, including winning $50 million in Kentucky last month. North Carolina received 305 applications for this $350 million round of great grants. Grant requesters have to participate in the FCC's Affordable Connectivity Program, which provides or provide access to comparable low-cost programs. So that's the $30 subsidy that was originally part of the, was it ARPA or Consolidated? I can't remember. But anyway, it's been rolled over to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So there's now $14 or some odd billion in the ACP. And that provides a $30 subsidy now to folks that are low income, and most service providers like Charter or Comcast, I believe, are offering a low-cost plan that's $30. So that would mean a free internet account if somebody qualifies for this low-income program. Applications were scored based on the number of households and businesses they proposed to serve, the average cost to serve those locations, and the speeds offered. Applicants had to agree to provide broadband speeds of a minimum of 100 megabits per second download and 20 up, scalable to symmetrical 100 on or before December 31st, 2026. So this is basically 100 by 20 is the definition of underserved in the IIJA or the BEAD program. So they have to meet that, which makes sense if they're going to be doing this, even though this is not BEAD. They're kind of keeping in sync with that program. It's interesting also that it's got to be scalable to symmetrical 100 megs. So, this is going to be all fiber, obviously, with, somebody like Charter. They're going to be doing fiber. They could do DOCSIS, and they could certainly, maybe with the DOCSIS they're deploying, do 100 by 100 symmetrical. But I'm assuming they're going to be doing fiber on any of these greenfield deployments. There's no reason they'd, if they're going in somewhere new, that they'd want to do a DOCSIS plant. So I'm assuming it's going to be fiber to the home. You can see here where the awards were made. I highlighted the ones that are Charter, which would be Spectrum Southeast, but you see also Yadkin Valley won a few. You've got ATMC, Focus Broadband. You've got an EMC in there, Blue Ridge Mountain EMC. Again, Yadkin Connect Holdings, it's Brightspeed. And then Woodstream also won some money here. Another quote here: reliable and affordable high-speed internet is a necessity for all North Carolinians to work, learn, connect, and access online healthcare, said Governor Roy Cooper in a prepared statement. These great grant awards will help thousands more North Carolina families and businesses across the state access high-speed internet and the opportunities it brings. So you can see the states are moving ahead with whatever money they have through previous programs, being something like ARPA or CARES, and they're all looking ahead to what they're going to be able to get through the BEAD program. But this reminds us that, we're still working on these FCC maps, and every time something like this happens, and you've got federal dollars that are going through the states that are being applied to fill in these unserved and underserved areas, that these areas are no longer going to be in the map. So if people are looking today at what's unserved and underserved, it's going to be very different about the time that the maps come out, because we're having all of these announcements now kind of on a regular basis on these previous funds. So when these maps come out in November, then we're going to see that a lot of these areas are not going to be on the map, because I'm assuming that Charter and Comcast, when they're uploading their coverage area, I don't know if they'll be able to, that's a good question. So what do they do if they're planning on building this out, but they're not going to be able to get anything in the ground by the deadline of getting their broadband coverage into the FCC fabric? So that is September 1st. So at that point, they may have to challenge their own information. I don't know how that works, or if they'll be able to put in a caveat in there that says, we've received funding, or maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the FCC, maybe there's a process where the FCC takes that into account, and they go, okay, well, the state's going to report to the FCC, hey, here's where these ARPA funds are going. The FCC knows, okay, this is federal money that's being applied to this area. It's being awarded by the state, so this needs to come off of the map. So I don't know how all that's going to work. But in the end, these areas are not going to be on the FCC broadband map because they're going to be covered already. If they don't already have broadband in the ground, it's places that are going to have broadband in the ground due to these previous federal funds. So again, as this time goes on, we'll be seeing more of this. And then, of course, between September and November, there's going to continue to be broadband deployment news as far as other operators that are going to be deploying broadband. And then after the maps come out, there's going to be more people, again, using funds and trying to get fiber into the ground. So there's going to be challenges back and forth. So when is that map set? It's going to be probably early next year is when the FCC figures out, okay, what's really unserved and underserved. They got to put a line in the sand at some point and say, okay, starting right now, these areas are unserved. So we'll see how that goes. But anyway, these MSOs are going to continue to do this, as well as smaller providers, as well as EMCs. They're all going to be trying to get, use whatever funds they can now to get broadband in areas that they cover, or that they could cover, so that any future federal funds can't be used there. So that'll make more efficient use of the funds that we've already allocated through these programs, as well as funds that we can allocate in the future, because there'll be fewer areas that we have to cover, which is good news, right? Thanks for joining me. So I appreciate that. If you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button, ring the bell, you'll be notified, and I will see you next time for Broadband Deployment News. Take care. Bye-bye.